It was a late afternoon at a crowded airport terminal, the kind of place where everyone was tired, impatient, and glued to their phones. Steven Seagal stood near a coffee stand, dressed simply in dark jeans, a loose jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low. No entourage, no attention, just a quiet man waiting for his drink. To most people passing by, he looked like any other older guy, calm, reserved, almost invisible in the chaos of rolling suitcases and boarding announcements. That's when the bully noticed him. The man was loud, broad-shouldered, and clearly enjoying the attention of a small group nearby. He laughed too hard, spoke too loudly, and shoved his way through people without apologizing. When he accidentally bumped into Steven, coffee nearly spilling, he stopped and turned around with a smirk. "Watch where you're standing, old man," the bully said, loud enough for others to hear. Steven looked up slowly. His face showed no anger, no fear, just steady eyes and a calm expression. "Didn't mean to be in your way," Steven replied quietly. That should have been the end of it. But bullies rarely stop when they sense what they believe is weakness. The man scoffed. "Figures. Guys like you are always in the way," he said, stepping closer, invading Steven's space. A couple of people nearby chuckled nervously, unsure whether to walk away or keep watching. Steven didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He simply shifted his stance slightly, placing his coffee down on the counter. The bully took that as an invitation. "What? You got nothing to say?" he mocked. "You deaf or just scared?" A few heads turned, phones subtly lifted. The air changed. What was once background noise now felt like a stage. Steven finally spoke again, calm and measured. "There's no problem here. Let's keep it that way." Something about his tone wasn't weak. It wasn't aggressive either. It was controlled, grounded. But the bully didn't hear caution. He heard challenge. He laughed louder. "You hear this guy?" he said to the people around him, "telling me to keep it that way." Steven remained still, eyes locked, posture relaxed but solid like a door that doesn't need to slam to let you know it won't budge. What no one there realized yet was this. The man being mocked, the man being pushed toward humiliation, had spent decades mastering discipline, control, and violence so precise it never needed to be loud. And the bully? He had absolutely no damn clue who he was dealing with. The bully grinned wider when Steven didn't react the way he expected. In his mind, silence meant submission. He leaned back slightly, puffed out his chest, and looked around as if the small crowd had gathered just for him. "See?" he said loudly. "Some people just know when to stay quiet." A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the area, not because the joke was funny but because no one wanted to be the next target. Steven picked up his coffee, took a slow sip, and set it back down. His hands were steady, his breathing even. To anyone watching closely, it was clear he wasn't nervous. He was patient. The bully stepped closer again, so close that their shoulders nearly touched. "You traveling alone?" he asked with a mocking tone. "Must be nice, not having anyone to stand up for you." Steven met his eyes. "I don't need an audience," he replied calmly. That answer irritated the bully. Calm responses robbed him of the reaction he wanted: fear, anger, embarrassment. So he raised his voice. "Did you hear that?" he said to the crowd. "This guy thinks he's tough." Now more people were watching openly. A woman near the gate frowned. A man shook his head. A few phones were clearly recording. The bully circled slightly, as if sizing Steven up. "You know what happens to guys like you," he said, smirking. "You walk around, thinking the world owes you respect." Steven turned just enough to face him squarely. His voice remained low. "Respect isn't owed. It's chosen." That should have been another warning. Instead, the bully laughed again. "Listen to this wisdom," he said sarcastically. "You a philosopher now?" Steven didn't answer. He didn't need to. The bully reached out and flicked the brim of Steven's cap with 2 fingers, a small gesture, but deliberately humiliating. A sharp intake of breath moved through the crowd. That was the moment it crossed from words into something else. Steven slowly removed the cap and set it beside his coffee. His movements were unhurried, almost ceremonial. "Don't do that again," he said quietly. There was no threat in his voice, just certainty. The bully paused for half a second. Then he smiled. "Or what?" The terminal seemed to hold its breath. People watching could feel it now, the shift. Steven's posture had changed, still relaxed, but rooted, balanced, like a man who knew exactly where his center was. The bully mistook that stillness for hesitation. "You see this?" he said, gesturing at Steven. "This is what happens when you let guys like this think they're equal." That was when a man in the background whispered to his friend, "Why do I feel like this is about to go very wrong for the wrong person?" Steven spoke again, not louder, not harsher, just clearer. "I'm asking you to walk away." The bully scoffed. "Make me." More phones were raised now. Some people stepped back, instinctively creating space. They didn't know why, only that something in the air felt heavy. "Quick question, where are you watching this from? Tell me your country and city in the comments below. And be honest, have you ever seen a bully push things too far in public?" The bully rolled his shoulders, enjoying the attention, completely unaware that the man standing in front of him wasn't calm because he was weak. He was calm because he was in control, and the line between humiliation and regret was about to disappear. The bully took a step closer, closing the small gap that remained between them. His voice dropped slightly, no longer playful, edged now with irritation. "You don't tell me what to do," he said. Steven didn't back up. He didn't step forward either. He simply stood where he was, balanced and composed, his feet planted like he'd chosen that exact spot for a reason. "I'm not telling you," Steven replied. "I'm giving you an option." That answer didn't land the way the bully expected. For the first time since this started, his smile faded. Just for a moment. Then his ego rushed in to cover it. "Options?" he scoffed. "You think you're in charge here?" He looked around, making sure the crowd was still watching. They were. Some faces showed concern, others curiosity. A few people had moved farther back, creating a loose circle around the two men. Steven could feel it too, the attention, the tension. But unlike the bully, he wasn't feeding on it. He was managing it. A young woman near the coffee stand whispered, "Someone should call security." Another voice replied, "Just watch. Something's off about this." The bully jabbed a finger toward Steven's chest, not hard enough to be a strike, but enough to be provocative. "You're standing in my space," he said. "Move." Steven glanced down briefly at the finger, then back up at the bully's eyes. "Take your hand away," he said calmly. The bully hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then, he pushed his finger harder. That was the moment everyone felt it, the invisible line being crossed. Steven exhaled slowly through his nose. He didn't touch the man. He didn't raise his hands. Instead, he shifted his weight ever so slightly, aligning his body at an angle that meant nothing to the crowd but everything to someone trained to see it. "You really don't know when to stop," the bully said, trying to sound confident. "People like you only understand force." Steven's voice remained steady. "Force is loud. Control is quiet." The words landed heavier than a shout ever could. The bully laughed, but it wasn't as confident now. "You threatening me?" "No," Steven answered. "I'm warning you for your own sake." That did it. The bully shoved Steven's shoulder, not enough to knock him over, just enough to prove dominance. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Someone shouted, "Hey, that's enough." Steven took one small step back, not from fear, but to reset his balance. His eyes never left the bully's face. He could feel his own heart rate slow, measured. This wasn't new to him. Chaos had been part of his life for decades. The difference was that now, he didn't seek it. He avoided it unless there was no other choice. The bully mistook that pause for uncertainty. "What, you done talking now?" he sneered. "Good." He leaned in again, too close, his voice low and mocking. "You should have stayed invisible." Steven finally allowed a hint of steel into his tone. "Last chance." The crowd went quiet. Even the background noise of the terminal seemed to fade. People sensed that whatever happened next would change everything. A man near the gate whispered, "I swear, this guy doesn't look scared at all." Another replied, "Yeah, and that's what scares me." The bully rolled his neck, loosening up like he was about to prove something. "You don't get to give me chances." He raised his hand not into a punch, but enough to threaten one. Steven didn't flinch. He spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "You don't need to do this. Walk away. Keep your pride. Keep your teeth." A few people in the crowd winced at that last line. The bully's eyes narrowed. "You think you're funny?" Steven shook his head. "No, I think you're making a mistake." For the first time, doubt flickered across the bully's face. Not because he recognized Steven, but because something deep in his instincts was screaming that this situation wasn't what it looked like. What would you do in this situation? Walk away to stay safe? Or stand your ground and face the bully? Comment, walk away, or stand your ground below. The bully glanced around again, noticing how many phones were pointed directly at him now. His jaw tightened. Backing down would mean losing face, so he made his choice. He took another aggressive step forward, and in that moment, everyone watching realized the truth. This wasn't a confrontation anymore. It was a lesson waiting to happen. The bully's last step forward didn't bring the reaction he expected. Instead of panic, instead of anger, Steven remained exactly where he was, calm, centered, unmoving. It was as if the space around him belonged to him now, not because he demanded it, but because he claimed it without effort. That stillness unsettled people. A middle-aged man standing near the departure board narrowed his eyes, studying Steven more carefully. Not the clothes, not the age, the posture. "Hold on," he murmured to the woman beside him. "That guy looks familiar." The woman glanced over. "Familiar how?" "I don't know," he said. "Just the way he stands." Steven slightly adjusted his footing again, subtle, almost invisible, but to trained eyes, it was unmistakable, balanced, grounded, ready without being aggressive. The bully noticed none of this. He was still riding the adrenaline of attention, mistaking silence for submission. "You're real quiet now," he said, smirking. "That's smart." Steven didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed, calm, but alert. Not challenging, not pleading, simply present. A younger man in the crowd frowned, pulling his phone down for a second. "Wait," he said slowly. "Isn't that?" He didn't finish the sentence. The bully snapped his fingers inches from Steven's face. "Hey, I'm talking to you." That's when Steven finally moved, not forward, not backward, but just enough to create space. His voice was low, controlled, and unmistakably firm. "You've said enough." The tone did something strange to the crowd. It wasn't loud, but it carried. Conversation stopped. Even the bully paused, just for a beat. "Enough," the bully repeated, trying to laugh it off. "You deciding when this ends now?" "I decided that a while ago," Steven said. That was when the middle-aged man spoke up, louder this time. "Are you Steven Seagal?" The question cut through the air like a blade. A few heads snapped toward the speaker. Others turned back to Steven, really looking at him now. The face, the eyes, the unmistakable presence. Steven didn't answer. The bully frowned. "Who?" he asked. The younger man who'd hesitated earlier whispered, "No way." Phones shifted from vertical filming to zooming in. Someone else murmured, "Nah, it can't be." Steven remained silent, his expression unchanged. Fame had never been something he leaned on, especially not in moments like this. The bully scoffed. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" He looked around. "You people serious right now?" No one laughed. A woman near the gate pulled up a photo on her phone, then looked up at Steven again. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. The bully felt the energy shift but didn't understand why. The attention that once fed his confidence now felt different. He wasn't the center anymore. Steven finally spoke, not to the crowd, but to the bully. "This doesn't need to go further," he said. "You still have time to walk away." The bully swallowed. "You think saying your name changes anything?" Steven shook his head slightly. "I didn't say my name." That line hit harder than any insult. The crowd buzzed now, not loud, but electric. People were connecting dots. Whispers spread in waves. "That's him. No way. I grew up watching his movies. Look at how he's standing." The bully glanced around, confusion creeping in. His voice lost some of its edge. "You all acting like this guy's special?" Steven met his eyes again. "No," he said quietly. "I'm just experienced." For the first time since this began, the bully didn't respond immediately. His instincts were fighting his ego now, and instinct was starting to win. Security guards could be seen at the far end of the terminal, alerted by the crowd. Still distant, but coming. The middle-aged man spoke again, more confidently this time. "You might want to back off," he said to the bully. Seriously, the bully bristled. "Mind your business," but his voice wasn't as loud, not as sure. Steven remained where he was, calm as stone. He hadn't thrown a punch, hadn't raised his hands, hadn't said who he was, and yet, the balance of power had completely shifted. The crowd knew it. The bully felt it. He just didn't fully understand it yet, but he was about to. The bully exhaled sharply through his nose, trying to steady himself. The confidence he'd been performing with all this time was starting to crack. And he could feel it. Too many eyes, too much silence. The situation no longer belonged to him. You people are acting like he's untouchable, the bully snapped, gesturing toward Steven. He's just a guy. Steven nodded slightly. That part is true, he said. I am just a man. The humility in his voice threw the bully off. There was no ego there, no need to prove anything. That was unsettling. But, Steven continued, his tone calm and grounded. I'm a man who spent a lifetime learning when violence is necessary and when it isn't. The words weren't loud, they weren't threatening, yet they carried weight. The kind that comes from experience, not imagination. The bully forced a laugh. You trying to scare me with a speech now? Steven took a slow step forward, not into the bully's space, but just close enough to make his presence undeniable. His posture was relaxed, shoulders loose, hands open at his sides. I'm trying to save you from making a decision you can't take back, Steven said. The crowd leaned in without realizing it. Even those who didn't recognize him yet could sense the authority in his calm. The bully glanced at Steven's hands. They didn't look clenched. They didn't shake. That disturbed him more than anger ever would have. You don't look like a fighter, the bully muttered, almost to himself. Steven met his eyes. That's because fighters want to fight, he replied. I don't. That answer landed hard. A murmur moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, That's cold. The bully clenched his jaw. You think you're better than me? Steven shook his head. No, I think you're standing at a crossroads. If way, the bully scoffed. Don't get philosophical. I'm not, Steven said. I'm being honest. He paused, letting the silence do the work. You walked over here looking for control. Respect doesn't come that way. The bully's face reddened. You don't know anything about me. Steven nodded once. You're right, but I know this moment, and I know how it ends depending on what you choose next. The tension in the air thickened. Even the bully's friends who had been laughing earlier were now quiet, shifting uncomfortably. Security was closer now, visible at the edge of the crowd. The bully noticed. He noticed everything now. You think having an audience changes things? He asked, his voice lower. Steven answered without hesitation. It changes responsibility. The bully swallowed. He hadn't expected that. Steven continued, his voice steady and firm but not aggressive. Every action you take from here will follow you. On camera, in memory, in consequences. He gestured subtly to the phones around them. You still have time to walk away with dignity. For a long moment, the bully said nothing. His chest rose and fell faster now. The adrenaline that once fueled him was turning into uncertainty. I don't back down, he muttered. Steven's expression softened not with pity, but with understanding. Neither did I, he said quietly, until I learned what real strength costs. That line hit something deep. The bully looked away for the first time, breaking eye contact. His shoulders tensed, then dropped slightly. Steven took a small step back, giving him space. Not retreating, offering an exit. You don't need to prove anything to me, Steven said. Or to them. The crowd was silent now. No whispers, no laughter. Just attention. The bully looked around again. Faces weren't entertained anymore. They were judging, waiting. Steven spoke one last time, his voice firm but calm. This ends now, one way or another. You decide which lesson you walk away with. The words hung in the air. The bully stood there, trapped between pride and instinct, knowing deep down that whatever he thought this was going to be, it wasn't going to go his way. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was heavy, loaded with meaning. The bully stood frozen, his jaw tight, eyes darting between Steven and the growing crowd. Whatever confidence he'd walked in with had evaporated. Then a voice broke through from behind the circle. Hey, I know who that is. People turned. A tall man in his 40s stepped forward, holding his phone at chest level, not recording, just staring. His expression was a mix of disbelief and certainty. That's Steven Seagal, he said clearly. Aikido master, actor, law enforcement trainer. The words rippled through the crowd like electricity. A woman gasped. Wait, that's Steven Seagal? Another voice chimed in. No way. Look at him. That's definitely him. Phones shot up again, this time not out of fear, but realization. Faces changed. Eyes widened. The energy in the space flipped completely. The bully's face drained of color. Steven Seagal? He repeated slowly. as if saying it out loud might make it untrue. Steven closed his eyes briefly and exhaled, not in relief, but resignation. He opened them again and looked at the man who had spoken. "You didn't need to say that," Steven said calmly. The man nodded. "Sorry, but he needed to know." The bully took an involuntary step back. His mind raced. Images, memories, movies, stories, clips he'd seen years ago but never paid attention to. The posture, the voice, the calm. It all clicked at once. You're that guy," the bully muttered. Steven met his eyes. "I'm just someone asking you to stop," he replied, but it was too late. The dynamic had shifted beyond recovery. Security finally arrived, 2 officers moving carefully through the crowd. They took in the scene, the phones, the tension, the wide-eyed spectators. "What's going on here?" one of them asked. Before the bully could answer, several people spoke at once. He started it. He was harassing him. He kept pushing. The officers looked at Steven, recognition flashing in their eyes. "Sir," one of them said respectfully. "Are you all right?" Steven nodded. "I'm fine." The bully stared, stunned. Respect, authority, calm all pointed away from him now. The officer turned to the bully. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back." The bully opened his mouth, then closed it again. He stepped back. Steven raised a hand slightly. "There's no need to escalate," he said. "It doesn't need to go further." The officer hesitated, then nodded. The crowd murmured in approval. "Do you believe real power is shown through aggression or through self-control? Type control in the comments, if you agree." The bully finally found his voice, but it sounded small now. "I didn't know," he said. "If I'd known." Steven interrupted him gently. "That's the point," he said. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The words hit harder than any threat could have. The bully swallowed. His shoulders slumped. "I crossed a line," he admitted quietly. Steven nodded once. "We all do sometimes. What matters is whether we learn from it." The officers exchanged a glance. One of them addressed the bully. "You're going to move along now." The bully complied without protest. As he walked away, the crowd parted not with cheers, but with silence. A heavy, humbling silence. Steven watched him go, his expression unchanged. A woman near the front spoke softly, almost to herself. He could have destroyed him. Steven turned slightly. "That wouldn't have helped anyone," he said. The officers thanked him and began dispersing the crowd. People slowly returned to their routines, though many glanced back at Steven with a new sense of respect. He picked up his cap, placed it back on his head, and took his coffee. For him, the moment was over. But for everyone who witnessed it, the lesson had just begun. By the time the crowd fully dispersed, the airport terminal had returned to its usual rhythm: rolling suitcases, distant announcements, hurried footsteps. But something had changed. The people who had witnessed the confrontation carried it with them, replaying it in their minds, already retelling it in messages and quiet conversations. Within hours, clips began appearing online, not dramatic punches, not a violent takedown, just a calm man standing his ground while another unraveled. The video titles varied, but the message was the same. Bully tries to humiliate Steven Seagal, instantly regrets it. Millions watched. What surprised people most wasn't who Steven Seagal was, it was what he didn't do. He didn't boast. He didn't threaten. He didn't use his reputation as a weapon. He used restraint. Comment sections filled fast. Real power is self-control. This is what discipline looks like. The scariest people are the calm ones. Some praised his martial arts background. Others focused on his composure. Many pointed out the obvious truth. If Steven had chosen violence, it would have ended in seconds. But he chose something harder. Later that evening, Steven sat alone in a quiet lounge, waiting for his flight. Someone approached cautiously, a young man who had been in the crowd earlier. "Sir," he said respectfully, "I just wanted to say, that was incredible." Steven gave a small nod. "I appreciate that." The young man hesitated. "I don't think I could have stayed that calm." Steven smiled faintly. "Neither could I once," he said. "It takes time. That was the lesson most people missed. Strength like that isn't built in moments of conflict. It's built in years of discipline, humility, and choosing restraint over ego, again and again." The bully, meanwhile, didn't make the news. There were no follow-up interviews, no public statements, just a man who walked away with his pride bruised but his future intact. and that mattered. Steven never spoke publicly about the incident. No posts, no interviews, no attempt to capitalize on it. When asked later by a reporter about handling confrontation, he gave a simple answer. Violence is easy. Control is rare. That line spread almost as fast as the video. People shared it, quoted it, reflected on it, because deep down, everyone understood the truth in it. We live in a world where loudness is mistaken for strength, where intimidation is confused with power. But moments like this remind us that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who doesn't need to prove it. Steven boarded his flight quietly. No one followed. No one bothered him. The attention had faded, but the impact hadn't. Somewhere else, someone would think twice before mocking a stranger. Someone would pause before letting ego take over. Someone would remember a calm voice in a crowded airport that refused to rise even when provoked. That was the real victory. Not domination, not fear, but dignity. If you believe true strength is shown through respect and self-control, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that remind us what strength really looks like.